Hello and welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. Luke Tscharke is an Australian landscape and nature photographer. Passionate about inspiring people to travel and see the beauty of the world around them, Luke originally trained as a quality assurance professional with a Bachelor of Science degree and has worked for some of the world's largest food and beverage companies, ensuring the quality and integrity of their products. The quality of Luke's work has been recognised by awards in many photography competitions, publications in books, calendars and magazines, and work with corporate clients, tourism organisations and charities. A regular contributor to Australian Geographic Magazine, where he's had 2 covers. His first feature story in the magazine was published in 2018 on the remote Western Arthur Range in Tasmania. Luke also contributes images and articles to the Australian Photography Magazine by running photography workshops for many clients each year across Australia. Luke has been fascinated by the natural environment ever since he was a child and has been able to merge his interests with a love of bushwalking to photograph some of Australia's most stunning and wild natural environments. We discuss his favourite place to photograph, Tasmania, immersing himself in the World Heritage listed wilderness, his decision to move into full-time photography and relocate there from Sydney, along with a lot more. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day Luke, welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks. I've just gotten back from a couple of weeks of travel, so just tends to be quite busy at the back end of the year, and so I'm away quite a bit and then come home and have to get used to life back in the the place I live, and then you're back off again a few days later. So
fair enough.
I'm in that phase at the moment.
If you don't mind, where have you been?
Oh, I went over to South Australia this last trip, which is actually where my family is from. It's where I was brought up, and it was nice to spend some time on Kangaroo Island with my folks. And then nice. I had a job over there as well, photographing a business on the Murray River, and so I was actually on a houseboat for a few days, which was
very nice,
quite pleasurable. Yeah,
one of the nicer shoots, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I am very lucky that I get to have some pretty cool experiences with some of the shoots that I do, but I have to say it is very hard work at the same time. So you'd sort of, I guess it's a work hard. I wouldn't say play hard, but it's definitely nice to be working in such a nice environment.
Fantastic. So why don't we start with your earliest photography memory? Where did you first pick up a camera and say, okay, this feels nice?
Oh, it's an interesting question. I feel like I've always been into photography. My dad had a whole bunch of Nat Geo magazines and books on the bookshelf that were like very picture heavy, and a lot of Steve Parish wildlife books. And I would look through them very often. I guess back in the day, not so much TV or social media or anything else to distract you. So I was looking through that, and I didn't really read them, but I was just always looking at the pictures and admiring them and wondering, if I could ever take photos like that one day. And I'd always had that kind of passion from, being able to capture the natural world from that without actually being able to do it. And, growing up, I had some access to film cameras and things, but didn't really get into it because I, didn't want to have my family have to pay for the film and all of that aspect of things. So I didn't really get into photography until digital came through. And that's when, the Canon started to release their more inexpensive DSLRs. Yep. And so when they came out, I was like, well, I've always been interested in this photography thing, and I don't know if I'm any good at it, but I'll give it a go. And so I spent $1,600, which is a crazy amount of money for me at the time, on a 450D and a kit lens setup, which is kind of hard to imagine paying that much money for something like that now. But it was something that was really, really good to be able to just get stuck into. And I really cut my teeth, I suppose, on when I was living in Melbourne on the cityscape there. I was really taken aback by the skyline. I guess I'd moved over there from Adelaide. Yep. And Adelaide doesn't have much in the way of a skyline, so it was really nice to be able to.
There's a couple of tall buildings.
Well, it's getting there, I suppose, isn't it? But compared to Melbourne, and had the big Eureka Tower and the Rialto and the beautiful Yarra River and all of the reflections in the river. At the time, there was also a big Ferris wheel in Birrarung Ma there. It was just a really beautiful cityscape, and so I really got stuck into cityscape photography, and would be going out after work every night, and I worked out that blue hour was probably the best time to be photographing, when there was still a bit of residual ambient light in the sky. And I didn't have any filters, so it was also a good time to shoot not having any filters and getting long exposures. So and that's sort of how it all began, really. Shot a lot in Melbourne.
Nice. You've moved on from Melbourne though. Now you're in I think in Australia, one of the best landscape photography locations in Tasmania now. Why the move, and was it a conscious move because of work, or was it lifestyle? What prompted that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually did a stint in Sydney in between. So I had a corporate career. So I was actually working as a microbiologist and a food scientist and quality assurance representative for the Coca-Cola company. And so I was like a corporate seagull, like flying around to all of the different capital cities and doing audits and all of those exciting things. And Sydney's an amazing city. And while I was there, I moved on from the cityscapes that I was shooting in Melbourne. And I guess Sydney's got a lot more outdoorsy things to do, and great like rock pools and beaches. I was based before I left up in the Northern Beaches at Warriewood or North Narrabeen, and so I had Turrametta Beach and North Narrabeen Pool just 2 or 3 minutes drive away. So it was really nice to be able to get stuck into the landscape side of things. I was very lucky to have some friends in Sydney that were quite adventurous and were able to go out to doing canyoning and snow camping in the Blue Mountains. In the Snowy Mountains, and so it was really great to get. And that's where the landscapes came from. And then my passion for photography essentially took over the passion that I had for the career that I had, and had to make a difficult decision, I don't think it was difficult, but it was one that I labored on probably for a few years, about quitting my career. And so I quit it. And within a few months of quitting that in Sydney, I'd moved to Tassie, and I'd always traveled to Tassie for all of my annual leave. I fell in love with Tassie after I did the overland track. I think it was back in 2013. And so most of my annual leave was spent, any time I really could manage, I would spend in Tasmania. And that really was my place. And so having the opportunity to move down there, I sort of took it straight away. I didn't have any family or that many connections in Sydney outside of the work that I was doing. So, so that's how I ended up in Tasmania. And it was purely, it's probably the first time I moved where I'd made the decision for me rather than a career or anything like that. So it was quite a big deal.
Talk us through a little bit about that decision to go full-time photography. Were you, everyone's conscious, you got to make money out of it, got to set yourself up. Did you sort of try and build up a bit of a cushion before you pulled the pin, or were you sort of starting to transition before you got to the point where you actually pulled the pin?
So it's always a good idea to have a bit of a nest egg behind you before you do that. And I did have quite a lot in the bank in terms of savings. I guess that was one of the benefits of having a high-flying corporate thing going on. Sure. And I also was able through that time to purchase a lot of equipment as well. So I'd very much set myself up with professional Sony equipment. Shout out to Sony. they and so that was really great to have all of that behind me, and so that gave me a lot more sort of a feeling of security in terms of taking the plunge. And I guess from a decision itself, I really was, I sort of said that the passion for photography overtook the passion for work, but I mean my passion for work was really not there at all. So from a decision perspective, it wasn't so much about whether I'd enjoy doing photography. It was more about, like you're saying, the financial aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time also, I'd worked on, while I was commuting to work, I had an hour commute from the Northern Beaches into North Sydney.
Yep.
I would be actually working on my social media profile. And so over that time, I made a conscious decision, I think at the start of 2014, to work on it. And then within a year or so, I had at least 60, 70,000 followers on Instagram. And so that was really fortunate because I could just repost all the shots that I'd already taken on Instagram. So that made it quite a bit easier. And through that, I'd made a lot of connections, and I was actually able, at that particular time, there was, I guess they call it in inverted commas, influencer work. I like to think of it more as destination marketing, because it's not with fedoras and all of that stuff all the time. But there was a lot of travel trips going. And so, that was something that I was really seeking, because, if I was using all my annual leave up to go to Tassie and things like that, there wasn't really any other time available to me to do some of these other trips that were going. Obviously, they paid significantly less than my salary, but I thought that, I'd be able to bring in enough from some of those opportunities to at least cover my costs. And I'm very aware that you're starting back off on the bottom rung of the ladder again and need to keep working on it. But it was definitely. I also had a lot of people asking me about running workshops and things, so I started doing some of those things as well, which I never really expected I was going to do. But it's a really great way to have some consistent income coming in. So so it's sort of a combination of things there, but and it was very hard work. It's still very hard work, but it is. You do get there if you're forced to do these things. It's like jumping into the deep end. You're kind of making yourself have to do it, and so you just adapt and make it work.
Yeah, this is it. I think the important thing to remember is, as you said, having that buffer there that you can, make sure that you're financially secure for a little while anyway, while you start building. In terms of that building, how important do you think that work around marketing your personal brand through Instagram, etc., has been?
I think Instagram, I'd talk about creating that account as my ticket out of my job. So I really firmly believe that if I didn't build a profile on there, that it would have, I don't think I'd be in this position right now. It was just the right time when I was doing it. I don't think necessarily that you need to have a profile like that to make it work. It was just the avenue that I took. And there are a few other photographers that sort of went that way, like Will Patino's another good example, where those sort of accounts could sort of help to build a profile that then could be a springboard to future work and other sort of relationships with tourism boards or other things like that. So certainly having that aspect was probably critical. And, developing a website as well. I spent quite a bit of time on that. Haven't really done so much on it more recently, but I'm not actually typically a person that likes to go out there and promote myself. So I found that very hard, but I just always tried to focus on putting up the best quality images that I could and making the captions engaging and make maybe help people to connect more with the imagery and just go about it that way. And I still am very bad. I could be promoting things so much more, but I feel like the quality of images speak for themselves, and that's really been my sort of ethos there, I suppose.
Fair enough. Do you think the boom time of social media is kind of over with that influencer style, I guess, account, or do you think that's just evolving into more videography and moving to that short form video sort of feel rather than the still images.
Yeah, I think that the day of the social media trips are certainly over. They really were backing off quite a bit, sort of 2019, and then COVID sort of just
killed it. Yeah.
made the end of that. There was obviously no point at that time, so I think. I don't know if it's going to come back how it was. I think there's enough content out there that people can, user-generated content, essentially. The quality of content's getting very, very good. And so it's a lot easier for people, brands and things to reshare content that's already been created. I'm finding most of my work's coming from product launches and things where there's more from a corporate perspective or technology and that kind of aspect rather than destination marketing so much. And I actually really love those jobs. I actually feel like they were the best work I've ever done in terms of you're getting paid by a tourism board to travel around a destination, and quite often the other people traveling with you are very good friends of yours as well, and you get to just have complete freedom to create whatever work you would like. So, but the pay was really not anything to live off of. But having said that, we still had full access to it.
Lots of pay by exposure.
Well, like I just was saying too, though, like we had full access to the images afterwards. So they would actually sometimes purchase the images from us. So that's additional income, or it's just a really great portfolio build. So it's not necessarily a sort of you're doing all this stuff for free when you can sort of lay it out there. And plus also the relationships that you can build with those organizations as well is really beneficial. Yeah.
I want to move on to some of the stuff that's more personal to you.
Yeah.
What is it that you're chasing most in your photography? What motivates you creatively?
Well, I think I've had a lot of thinking about that in terms of what is it about photography that's kind of what makes me tick with it. And I think if I could distill it down to one word, it's beauty. And the beauty of the natural world. And it's not just the natural world, mind you. Like there's anything that's beautiful. I'm very interested in capturing and being able to just create something that's beautiful and help and provide that to the viewer so that they can have I don't know, a better day having seen something nice and have it on their wall or see it on their feed. If I can create something beautiful, then that's a contribution that I can make to society, I suppose.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the main motivator. And also another one for me is moments in time as well, and being able. I very much enjoy being able to. It's interesting. I had a conversation with someone more recently about the power of visualization and visualizing an image, and the argument was that if you're visualizing things, then you're not going to be adaptable or things like that, which there's some truth to. But for me, if I can visualize an image, and then I can actually plan for when the conditions are going to be right for that image, and go in and actually execute that image and create sort of exactly what I'd visualized, or sometimes maybe even better or slightly different, but it's similar. I guess I get a lot of enjoyment out of that as well, and so that does drive me quite a lot as maybe a personal challenge, or just I don't really know exactly the motivator itself, but I do very much enjoy that too.
I was going to ask there, have you found yourself doing that more often now, having thought about it, or was it just something that you're always kind of doing but weren't really conscious about it?
Yeah, I think there's a few factors that have changed. I think when you start working for yourself, you actually have a lot less time. When I was working full time, I had the weekend, I would just go somewhere and I had the weekend to do something.
You're driven to that timeline, you got to be there. And
you just make the most of it. But now I can actually pick and choose when I do things. And so it's very important that, return on investment's such a terrible way to look at doing photography. But at the same time, if you've got limited time, anyway, you're it's much smarter to look at the conditions and plan for when they're right, and then execute a plan and get the shot, rather than spending time and missing out. So, but that's I guess because I've got those particular shots in mind, and that's just the way I approach things. Other people are much more exploratory, and they don't have shots in mind and just come up with things. And I do that too, mind you. But for me, there's just something special about seeing a amazing subject, maybe a big rock arch, and then realizing you're facing west when you're looking at it, which means that the Milky Way at some point is going to be over that rock arch. And then maybe you want the moon to be lighting up the face of the rock arch. So you can actually, work out the dates that would actually happen, and
astronomically work that out.
And then actually be able to execute that and make it happen. And I think I get a big
clouds.
Yeah, well, that's right. But then, you can get very good at predicting and planning for clouds as well with the software. And if that doesn't work out at the location that you were hoping to go to, then you'll just change tact and go with somewhere else. So, and I think another thing that motivates me now that I think of it is being able to conceive of those sort of shots, and then, potentially no one's shot it that way before. And for me, there's always a huge power in terms of being able to create unique imagery, and that's one way that can be done. So I think that's probably a big part of what drives me in that respect.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of that planning process, how long would you spend in the planning of one of those shots that you visualised? It might, conditions might not be right for a year, I guess, for some things. So it might pop into your head to go and shoot that arch. And that, okay, well, I've missed Milky Way season this year, so it'll have to be next year that I do it.
Yeah.
Is it that kind of length of time sometimes?
It can be. Yeah, it definitely can be. There's a couple shots that I really want to get that. There's only a handful of dates each year that it works, and some of them are also quite remote locations as well. So, there's a huge amount of physical commitment to get to those places to be there at the right time as well. I mean, you can just go there and fluke it as well, which is one option as well. But if you can plan it, then why not? So that's definitely the case. I've had other opportunities where I've worked it all out in terms of when the right conditions are going to be, and it just so happens it's that night or it's the next night, and then the moon will be too strong and that shot won't be on, and then because of the phase or my travel schedule, I wouldn't be able to do that again until the following year. So it's sort of like, oh well, I might be flying out tomorrow morning, but I'm going to go to shoot that tonight, because I know that if I don't do that tonight, then it might be next year, and then who knows what I'm doing next year at that time. So there is a fair degree of thought process behind that. And in terms of the planning itself, it's not necessarily doesn't necessarily take too long to do it. You just get photo pills out and work out all of the angles. And sometimes if it's a cliff or there's something more, it's a three-dimensional sort of thing where you need to know what height the Milky Way is going to actually be to clear a subject, then you might have to use some other software that, like Google Earth or TPE 3D, to actually work out timings and things if you don't have all night. And so those sort of aspects, I might spend an hour or two on that. And then if I work out that works on other dates, then I'll actually put them into my calendar as well, and just so that I can see coming up that might be an opportunity, which I can then match with the weather. So so there's a fair bit that goes into it. I've actually been creating my own personal app, which shows all of the locations that I would like to photograph, and actually I can create plans for all of them as well, which has been a bit of a game changer actually in terms of getting shots that I like and being able to prioritize them. So I don't know. I'm definitely a nerd with it all. I certainly don't expect anyone else to have to do any of that stuff, but I think it probably stems from the fact that I'm actually horrendously disorganized, and so if I don't plan these things like that, they're just never going to happen.
Fair enough. When did things click for you that your photos shifted, I guess, from taking a shot of an experience, i.e. what you see in front of you, as opposed to doing something more artistic with it?
Yeah, I don't know. I see one thing I really struggle even to look at my work as art. I know that might
Okay.
not sound right to some people or not, and I'm certainly not suggesting that I don't feel that it could be, but I don't actually think of it that way.
Wow.
I guess
Okay.
I just see it as a creative process or something. I'm just capturing something beautiful, and what's the absolute most beautiful conditions? What's the, how can I do it in the best possible way? And so,
Yeah.
it just might be the way my brain works, but I'm definitely trying to just to distill that down as best I possibly can.
Mm.
And if if that makes it art, then that's awesome, and I'm certainly open to that. But for me, it's just about capturing the moment and being able to present that in the accurately and in a way that is engaging as well.
Yeah. 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 How would you define success in your photography?
I don't know if I like the S word very much.
Okay.
Yeah, just because you
Well, I
know,
mean, you go out, you take your shots, you come back, you process them, and you go, "Yeah, it was okay." Versus, "Hey, this is fantastic."
I,
What switches from that?
yeah, well, it's definitely just a feeling for me then in that case. If I come back from a shoot and I feel like I've got some shots that I'm very happy with and that's
Mm.
successful, and I guess you could then say, well, how do you know if you're happy with them or not? And I think for me, it's more like a visualization thing again.
Yeah.
I've got some level of expectation of what I might be able to create, and if I exceed that or create something on the same level, but it ends up being quite different, but I'm still happy with the quality of it, then for me, that's very successful as well. But yeah, and I guess ordinarily there's not too many times I go out where I don't feel like it was worth it, because I think one of the key skills of landscape photography is being adaptable and being able to read the conditions and pivot on that and find something else if what you're expecting doesn't work out. So I certainly don't like visualize something and then just go straight at that, and if that and just try and make it work no matter what. I always say you need to know when to hold them and when to fold them,
Yep.
as the
Yep.
great quote says. So it's always important to have that kind of a go no go kind of phase where you change to something else. But yeah, it's definitely related to the quality of the images that I'm capturing. And yeah, I don't really consider it anywhere from a financial perspective or how many workshops I'm running or any of those sort of things as
Sure,
being
sure.
successful. Maybe from a sharing perspective, and if I'm selling a lot of prints or I'm getting a lot of work out there and people are really engaging with it, to me that's also something that I would really want to do, because I feel like with photography you're taking all this content, and at the end of the day you're really wanting to be sharing it, otherwise
Yeah.
how do people know what you're up to?
Oh, this is it. I hear a lot of people talking about, and expressing you shoot for yourself, which is fine in terms of making yourself happy with your own work. But if you're not sharing it, who's going to know that you're doing it? It's kind of like I was talking to another photographer a few weeks ago, and he said it's like you can be the most virtuosic violin player, but if all you're doing is playing in your bathroom and not in a concert hall, how's anyone going to know?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, I agree with both aspects. So you definitely want to be photographing for yourself, because you need to have that personal enjoyment with what you're doing. And if everything that you're doing is for other people, which I have had the experience of doing, and it does take the gloss off it. So it's
Yeah, it's not
very,
as much
very
fun shooting to a brief, is it?
Yeah, well, and that's why I don't do weddings and things like
Yeah.
that as well. Like for me, it was very important that I'm not judging anyone that does, but for
No,
me,
no,
like
I'm the same. Yeah.
I quit my job to do landscape. So it's sort of, if I'm open to the idea of getting into it in the future if that's something that I'm passionate about, but I
Yeah.
can't. I don't feel that. Maybe you shouldn't knock something till you try it. So there's definitely that going there. But I have been quite steadfast in the fact that I should really only be working on projects and things that are aligned with what I'm interested in. And if I start to divert from that too much, it can you can start to feel more like work rather than your passion, and I think that will burn you out in the end. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
so that's something just to really I'm really careful with.
Mm. In terms of that passion, how would you describe the feeling that you get when you're out in the field? It's
Well, yeah, for me, it's basically I basically do lose myself, so I'm not even thinking about anything else but taking the pictures.
Mhm.
So, well, I am thinking about my personal safety and at making sure I eat
Sure.
and where to camp that night or whatever. But in terms of, I it is pretty confronting after a trip actually coming home, because I haven't thought about everything for 5 days or however long it's been
Yeah, yeah.
that I'm out, and then all of a sudden everything you had to do and your whole life just floods back onto you. So that there's a bit of a flip side to it, I suppose. But for those moments when you're out there, it is quite blissful in a way, because you really are. It's like, I guess you could say it's like a meditation or an intense focus, and I try to keep things where I'm just focused on, I'm just taking photos now. And I actually, when I'm home, I quite often don't take many photos on a day-to-day basis, and then I'll go out on these trips and I'll take thousands and thousands of photos. So it's a very all or nothing thing for me, how I
Yeah.
operate, and I feel like that's nice to be able to get home and then switch off from it as well. And then
Mm.
it's nice to go out and then be just completely intense with it, and just total immersion. So
Yeah,
yeah.
nice. If someone asked you to describe your style, what would you say?
Uh, yeah, I'm very aware that people have styles, and I can definitely pick people's work from a style. And I feel like it's kind of asking you to look in a mirror and describe what you look like.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a challenge to do that, but I would like to think that my images are very clean, very true and accurate to the scenario. And I'd love
Yep.
for people to sort of see that and go, "Wow, it's actually like that there. That's amazing."
Mm.
So, and also, yeah, it's beautiful. I'd like to really love that people think that of my images. And I'd like to have a strong subject generally as well,
Yep.
and some sort of lead into that subject, or some sort of astronomical figure, or other sort of natural occurrence happening around that as well. I really enjoy focusing on wildflowers, or when I go to a location, will be what's different about this location this time, and I should really focus on that. So it's a lot of the time it's with different environmental situations that might only happen at certain times. So that can also be a factor. I'm aware that's not really talking about as much of a creative style as content, but I think I'll leave it for other people to describe what my creative style might be.
Well, I guess the follow up for me is always, how do you feel that is developing for you? And is it still developing? Is it something that you consciously think about in terms of your creative style, or is it something that you kind of go, okay, well, it is what it is, and it'll evolve on its own?
Yeah, I think it's, for me, I have had times where I've reflected on that, and now I don't really. The only thing I would look at is, for example, I really love black and white, and I really love infrared photography, and I really don't do very much of it. And a big part of that is actually that social media doesn't really reward
Yeah, it
that kind
doesn't
of
play well there,
photography,
does it?
which is
Instagram. I
yeah, I
know
think
if I'm
Vero
putting
might be a
black and
little bit
white up.
better. I've
Yeah,
been getting into that a bit, but I've been on Instagram for a long time, and certainly have tested black and whites a few times, and the response is always
yeah,
much less than, and not that it's about that, but you do want to maintain an audience and
sure.
keep
Sure.
people looking at your images. But I'm very keen to do more of that. So I think it's more about what aspects would I love to engage with more. I'm actually interested in doing a little bit more environmental portraiture type work.
Hmm.
I really enjoy drone photography, and so getting into that a little bit more. So yeah, it's just trying to find, I guess, new and different areas to focus on, and I'm always trying to find something that's a little bit different, or a bit gives your work a bit of an edge. There's so many many photographers out there, so it's always nice to focus
Absolutely.
on techniques or things that sort of make your work stand out a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that you've done, I say recently, but it's been going for a few years now. You teamed up with Paul Hole and Nick Monk, and you've got your YouTube channel, Talking Landscape Photography, which, for those that haven't seen it, it's one of the best landscape photography channels out there.
Oh, thanks.
How did that start? How did you team up with those guys, and what's the genesis of Talking Landscape Photography?
Yeah, well, I think Nick and I had always talked about doing a podcast or some sort of thing just to talk about landscape photography, which is no
Yep.
surprise. That's where the name came from. I think we, Paul and I are dear friends as well, and Paul can talk the ear off of whatever the saying is. So it was always going to be good from that perspective. And I think from our it was definitely born out of COVID. So we were all, everyone's sitting around. People didn't know what to do, and we thought, well, there's no. Why don't we sort of create a place where the photography community could actually tune into and get some information on well, at that time it was weekly, which is pretty intense frequency actually to do a live show like that. But having said that, when you're sitting at home and you can't travel, you've got time to actually put into organizing those sort of things.
Yeah.
So we basically, just thought, why don't we just do something that people can tune into? Initially, it was all run on Zoom, and then we sort of pivoted and really pushed it through YouTube more so. And that was the main reason, was just to guess take the pressure off those live sessions and make it more intimate with our actual guest rather than having everyone else on there. So I think, and we really have never tried to monetize it as such. I think the only thing we're really doing now is running workshops under that sort of name, just to help to get a few dollars in the door. But other than that, it's really just something that we're doing for the community, and we really do it because we love it, and I think the reason that we do it live, and the reason we're still doing it, and we're almost hitting our 100th show, it's the end of November is number 100, which is quite hard to fathom. It's really that we've done it live, and it's going up warts and all, and we don't have to do anything at the end of it. So I know for a fact, if we had to edit it, and I've got a lot of respect for you being able to edit all these episodes, if I had to sit down and do all of that extra thing, it just would never have continued, because it's just like an additional time drain. But being able to just sort out a guest and flick the live button and have a chat for an hour or two is really, just been brilliant. And all the people I've been able to meet through it, connections that we've been able to make has been very, very rewarding from that. So, and we'll hopefully be able to continue into next year with it. It's very challenging with managing schedules and finding guests and making it all work. And we're having to rely a lot more now on pre-recorded episodes, because it's quite challenging to have everyone there at the same time. And so which is not, we don't actually want to do. We'd much rather do it live. It's actually quicker and easier doing it live. There's more work involved in pre-recording. But at the same time, we're very determined to keep it going, because we do have a core following there that really enjoys tuning in and watching the guests that we have on. So we've got another show on next week, and hopefully run through till just before Christmas, and see where things go out from there. So
nice.
It's been a special thing to do.
For me, one of the nicest things about it is that warts and all approach is very open, honest. It's not as polished as some of the, and that's not denigrating.
Oh, don't worry. Like we've gone. I'm a perfectionist, so it's very hard to
I
not do
like
that.
the rough edges.
So but we just have to either that or it's just not going to happen. So and that's I think that's one reason why the following hasn't been astronomical, because it's we're not, they're long form chats as well. A lot of people don't have that amount of time.
That's it.
We're not putting production value into it. It's all about the content and the discussion, and there's been some incredible guests and information that I've learnt from the time that we've been on there. So it's really great to think that we've talk to all these people, and some of these people mightn't have had many interviews, and you can actually go on YouTube and hear all about their story and their
Yeah.
photography, and I think that's a really special thing.
And I think the other part of it, which I certainly can't do with an audio podcast, is that you can actually see some of the people's work. Which
That was actually another big motivator too, and
yeah,
Paul's a fantastic critiquer and judge as well. So and just being able to like have an image up on the screen and actually be able to discuss it is a
yeah,
huge asset. And I know that podcasts are very easy for people because they listen on their commute and things like that. But there's quite a power to be able to actually look at an image and actually discuss it, or play a video and see what the content is there. So that kind of format I was always attracted to. I would really love to be able to have a clips channel where we can just cut out like all of the amazing little nuggets of information that's
yeah.
been there over a period of time. Maybe one time we'll have some time to actually do that. But yeah, that's definitely a big factor there.
Yeah, fair enough. In terms of where you shoot, obviously living in Tasmania, you spot for choice with lots of different landscape types. You've got seascapes, you've got mountains, you've got rainforests, some of the best and most pristine rainforests in the world, let alone Australia. What's your favourite place to shoot and why?
Oh, yeah, that's a favorite's an interesting one. I mean, yeah, my favorite's definitely the southwest of Tasmania. And I don't get there very much because is a challenge to do it,
Yeah,
and also from the
not many
timing and
people
all of
do
that.
because there's not too many
Yeah,
roads.
well, yeah. There's not a lot of you can't just drive up to some of these beautiful views and park
Yeah,
in the car park and take a photo.
they take commitment. And,
Yeah, they do, and but that's all part of the enjoyment. It's in type 2 fun or whatever they call it.
yeah,
Being able to get out there and it's a visual journey to get to these places. You're in the wilderness. The landscape's doing what it's done for tens of thousands of years, and you're just a spectator to it. And
yeah,
you're part of the wilderness. You're walking through it. It's all over you. It's in your
yeah.
boots. It's in your hair, whatever's left of it.
Sucking
And
your blood.
so yeah, exactly. Yes. So, and you're sleeping in it, you're listening to it all the time. Like it's such an immersive thing to do. And on top of that, having I definitely think some of the Southwest locations are the most beautiful places in the world. And to have that on your doorstep is pretty incredible. But yeah, you do have to. I always say you have to work hard for it in Tasmania. It doesn't often come to you on a
Yeah,
little platter there. You can't just get chop it into many places, and it was very, very much looked down upon to do that. So that's one area that I very much connect with, and don't spend a lot of time there, but when I do, it's very rewarding, and it's challenging work. And
yeah,
also in terms of sharing images from those locations, it's a very sensitive area and very challenging to get to area, so you don't want to be parading everything around and telling people where everything is, and encouraging people to do things that may be beyond their capabilities.
mm,
So there's also those kind of aspects to consider with that. But yeah, I
definitely.
think that's definitely where I would be saying is my favorite.
Okay, cool. In terms of where you live, how do you feel that influences what, but also, and to me, slightly more importantly, how you shoot? I'm really interested in that nexus between location, technique, and subject, and
Mm.
how people sort of interrelate those three things.
Yeah, well, I think it's a really interesting question, and Tasmania's kind of got a lot of heritage, I suppose, in terms of great landscape photographers and wilderness photographers. And I have to admit that probably my greatest inspiration is someone like Peter Dombrovskis, who
Mm,
is a very famous wilderness photographer, and he's created, or over those years, there's definitely a Tasmanian style, and it's a very straight up kind of landscape. You're not really tinkering with anything. You can
yep.
certainly enhance it, but the idea is to respect it and to present it truthfully. And so that's definitely part of my process. Doesn't mean I don't touch things up here and there, but it's not like dropping in skies or moving things around or warping or anything like that. So that's sort of an important part of it for me. And I guess you could also say, because I'm putting so much planning into these shots and trying to execute them in real life, I suppose I'd much rather create a magical image in the camera than a beautiful moment in Photoshop. And so for me, it's really important to be able to say that that's what was there. In terms of, I really like more recently getting up closer to subjects and helping them to fill the foreground and using the foreground to help tell the story. I'd love to do that even more. It's very challenging to do, and I find it hard to have patience sometimes to do big focus stacks or some median stacks of 45 panels and stitching all that together. It's not really what I do. I much rather take one photo and do it right in one photo than having to put all of these photos together over a course of days in post processing. But yeah, I love Pandani, which is a local, Tasmanian endemic species, which looks like maybe the top of a pineapple or something like that. Yeah. Beautiful plant, and that makes for incredible foregrounds. Looks amazing in infrared. And different flowers like Scoparia, which is related to Pandani actually, and all sorts of other native flowers and Fagus as well, which is the native deciduous beech tree that we have around Cradle Mountain and other areas. So there's always these annual occurrences that also excite you to get out. And obviously you've got your auroras and other bioluminescence, other natural events. So working with those as subject material is really important as well. And then incorporating those, it's all well and good to have Scoparia flowering or Fagus or bioluminescence, but how do you put that into a greater image? It should be a great image if that bio was there or not. So how do you make that work? And so that's for me tying it all together and making it balance and harmonize is then the challenge with that too. And sometimes it just doesn't work, and I don't feel like it was a success, I suppose, with the S word there. But other times it does. So I don't know if I answered the question directly there.
That's a fantastic answer. I mean, I've found obviously the whole spectrum from people that haven't really thought about it, or they tend to travel to take photos because they live in a city and they're suburban area. It's a bit like me. I'm an hour from the beach, but seascapes are my favourite shot.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And you're based up in Sydney, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm based in Sydney.
Yeah. So you got like the seascapes there. I still feel like it's the best seascape location in Australia, really, just in terms of if you had to live somewhere.
Yeah, they're on the Sapphire Coast. I reckon the Sapphire.
Oh, yeah, Sapphire's pretty good too. Yep. Definitely. My mate Davey Rogers down there. He's got more than enough to keep him busy down there. So yes, absolutely. I can totally agree with that.
Yeah, but I think some people do think more deeply about that. How they interrelate between where they are, what they're shooting, and how they're shooting. And for me, it's really about have you thought about it? What do you think about it? And when does that come up to the surface, I guess?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I definitely do have very strong kind of personal decisions that I've made, I suppose, that I don't do this, I do that. It doesn't mean that I can't try and experiment outside of that and be completely rigid to it. Like, for example, wildlife is not really something that I'd seek out, but if I can put it into a landscape, that's really great. Or if that's all that's on offer and I've got a long lens, then why not, sort of thing. But I'm not going to be going out seeking wildlife photos unless there was an outcome required for that. So that's sort of maybe an example of an approach there that sort of just helps you, because there's so many things you can do. Like underwater photography is another good example. I'd dearly love to be good at that and spend time doing that, but I've got to sort of put some sort of barriers or limits to what I need to focus on, because I'd rather be really good at certain things and do it well than sort of spread myself really thin across a whole bunch of things and get confused and spend money on this thing and that thing and have a wardrobe full of all this equipment that you're never using. So that's something that I've been really clear on with myself.
And I think those limits that you do put on yourself, for me anyway, they're quite important for actually bringing structure to what it is that you're producing, as opposed to, just as you said, generically trying to do everything, and as you say, buying a load of gear that you're only going to use once or twice.
That's right. Definitely. And gear acquisition syndrome is real, and I definitely have it. So I don't need any encouragement to buy the next latest greatest thing. So that's might be a self-preservation technique perhaps with that, but definitely.
What's your most memorable photography experience?
I've got a few. I've got many really but for me, like, I always kind of go back to what sort of first inspired me to get into wilderness photography, and that was alluded to earlier, doing the overland track.
Yep.
Which at the time when I did it, I remember getting ready for it. I spent thousands of dollars on bags and boots and gaiters, and I didn't really have any. I didn't really even do any of that sort of stuff at all. And I remember thinking, have I bitten off way more than I can chew here? And even at the start of the walk, the pack was way overweight, and we went a different way, and it was boggy and slipping over tree roots, and it was really, much harder than I was expecting it to be as well. On the second evening, I had this experience where we were out shooting sunset at Barn Bluff, which isn't a place you'd normally end up at sunset, so it requires a bit of effort to be out there at that time. And I was standing on the track looking at Barn Bluff, and there was this huge big cloud over the top of the bluff, and it looked like a big UFO or something just sitting over the top, and it just with the sun. Yeah, something like that. And as the sun was setting, it just lit up in this crazy orange color, and just a really powerful scene. And I managed to take a few images that night that I was very happy with. But I just remember standing on there watching that all unfold, and the silence around me, and I was the only person I could see, and just having that experience on my own, being out in the wilderness, being out in nature, and having that connection to it. I suppose I actually understood it. Really understood for the first time why people like to get out into those environments and actually spend why would people bother doing that? Why would you go through put yourself through all of that? I never really could comprehend
why would you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go and take astro?
Yeah, well, that's right. Like all of those kind of aspects, I hadn't really clicked in. And then when you have that moment and that sort of fires up that passion, or you can have that deeper experience, I suppose that was a real instigator for me in terms of I really need to get out here and do this thing more often. And I think really from that time, I started to do a lot more outdoor, I guess, landscape photography. I remember having a thought to myself, I don't know if I could do landscapes. When my camera gear could get wet, and I'd have to get a bag that could keep all the rain out, and all the dust is going to get into my expensive lenses, and so all of those sort of funny things that your brain goes to. So I'm glad that I decided to just go ahead with it anyway. And I think having those kind of experiences like the one I was talking about really helped to consolidate, and you just have to think about that time, and then you're automatically planning the next one. It's very hard to say no.
Yeah, I'm usually planning the next one before I leave on the first one.
yeah, that's always good. And I think it's really important for your mental health too, actually, to have
absolutely
a trip like that to look forward to. And like, you might be working and things suck, but then you can just think, oh, well, I'm going to be in Tassie in 2 months. Come on, it can't be that bad. So
that's exactly it.
Yeah, so that's definitely pretty awesome. But yeah, it's always those moments always involve a mountain or being out in the wilderness for me, and often solitude as well. I think if you can safely get out into these places and have time on your own, or then it's a really formative thing to do.
I was going to ask, do you prefer shooting alone or do you prefer shooting with other people?
Well, I actually do prefer shooting with other people. I really enjoy sharing moments with people. I enjoy using other people as a motivator as well. Like it's very hard to get up on your own at 3 a.m. when, it's very easy just to make the decision yourself to not do that. But if you've roped someone else into it, then it's more likely to happen. So I think that's a big aspect. But it's really nice to be in these places and just go, how good was that, mate? That was just so cool. Whereas, you can still do that to yourself, but it's not quite the same. But I think I always try to do at least 1 or 2 trips a year, like say if it's a hiking thing or something like that on my own, just to sort of have that connection. And we had a guest on our podcast, Martin Hawes, who is a really very, very experienced outdoorsman down here, and he the massive advocate for the solitude and the I think it's very hard to fully comprehend and experience a wild place when there's other people there, because you're naturally talking to them and you're not fully taking in what's going
you're not
on.
Concentrating on the experience as much.
Yeah, but I'm not certainly not saying that when you travel with someone else, your photos aren't as good or anything like that. In fact, I really enjoy working or shooting with other people, and been very fortunate to photograph with some other amazing photographers and understanding and seeing their process, seeing the locations that they're seeking, which is quite different. I really enjoy shooting with my good friend Ben Mays, who he's very focused on the smaller scenes and the more intimate scenes, and I'm not normally doing that, and so it's really nice to photograph with someone else that has a different approach and help you to sort of expand your horizons a little bit there, or maybe don't look at the horizons and look down and see the other things. So certainly both is just as good as each other, and it's good to have a balance between that. And I do feel like my balance is probably a bit out. I should probably do some more stuff on my own, and so I'll have to make sure I schedule that in.
Yeah, I love shooting on my own, but I also love the fact that you can be standing there with 3 or 4 other people and everyone comes away with something completely different. Even though you're there at exactly the same time, you might even be using the same shutter speeds and similar settings.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. Although if you're at someone like Tarameta Beach on a Saturday morning, at least how it used to be, it's hard to imagine anyone getting any other shots that other than it being the same. So I think there's always some aspect where everyone's after the same thing, but it's always good to have in the mind that, if you have seen it shot a certain way, what can you do that makes it a little bit different? And that's certainly an approach I try and take as well. Nothing wrong with taking the hero shots either, mind you.
Oh yeah, the icons are iconic, and you've got to get your own take on it, and that's the thing. The conditions might be different, or the light might be slightly different. So I don't see any problem in taking iconic shots as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
We all have our horror stories. What's yours?
Oh, dear, oh dear, horror stories. Horror stories. I mean, I remember having a terrible time when I was flying from Iceland to Norway and didn't have a camera bag for a while, and didn't have, well, it was a big aurora forecast, and basically I didn't have a tripod. So because my bag didn't arrive, and so I had to try and quickly scramble and find a tripod that I could use so I could photograph the aurora that night. And I managed to find one with like the wind-up handle. That like maybe a $30 Velbon one or something like that, and was using that, and that was definitely a bit of a a step backwards in that respect. But I mean, that's not really a horror story, but it was at the time in my mind. Like, I've come all the way around the other side of the world, and I don't have a tripod now, and I'm here to shoot the aurora, and there was massive geomagnetic storms. These are
going
like
on.
storms where you're looking directly up above you and the aurora's raining down on you, and you think you're looking at it all, and then you turn around and realize that the aurora's 360 degrees around you, type stuff. So you don't want to not have a tripod in those moments. So anyway, yeah, that was, that those sort of things can happen, I suppose. But I guess if I'm struggling that much, then I guess I've been quite fortunate. I guess there's always things that go wrong. It's going to happen, and I think it's about I put a lot of effort in being prepared and having backups and redundancy and those kind of aspects. But I guess if I'm thinking of horror, it's going to be something about, and my nightmares are often I forget my camera bag, or I someone steals my bag out the car, or something like that. It's always something to do with equipment not making it where it should.
Yeah, I'm a victim of my own doings there. I left a tripod shoe on a different body and went out to take some shots of a waterfall, and basically went to set up and went, oh, where's the shoe? It's not in the bag, not on the camera. Oh well, I won't be shooting long exposures.
Oh no. Damn.
Didn't enjoy that shoot much at all.
No, definitely.
It made it worse because it wasn't a straightforward hike. It was probably about a 5 or 6K hike in, so 10Ks in and out, all up to get there and not be able to really shoot what I'd envisaged.
Oh well, it reminds me a bit of a shoot that I had earlier this year where I got in about the second day and my boot started falling apart because I'd actually accidentally put on an old pair of boots rather than the new pair of boots that I had bought for that walk. Yeah. And basically spent the rest of the walk wondering if my boot was going to fall apart and have to walk out just on my socks or something like that. So certainly not the place you wanted to be doing that, but yeah, it's it doesn't definitely doesn't matter how much you prepare, and sometimes it's just these things happen.
What's the practice of photography taught you about the world?
It's taught me that it's a very beautiful place, and that you can find beauty in all sorts of areas. It doesn't have to be in the wilderness. It can be in a suburban environment. And while the world is, looks like it's going down the toilet pretty quickly, it doesn't mean that there's places that aren't just the way that they've always been. There's not as many, and there's a lot of people trying to make sure that there isn't anything left. But it's really nice to know that there's these places that exist, and that the world still is, doing what it does, and certainly the natural world. And these places are there for us to enjoy and for us to experience, but they're also there for us to protect as well. And it's really made me keenly aware of ensuring that these places, that we like to photograph, are protected and looked after, and we're custodians for those places. So that's certainly a big lesson that I've had around what's in the world and how it works.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, I guess that I've also learned that people are amazing, and most people that I've dealt with in photography are just the most incredible people. So there's always going to be a few bad eggs along the way, but the amount of amazing people that I've met just all around the world and doing this and being able to meet someone and just start talking about photography, and it's just such a great icebreaker, or way to get to know someone. Totally. It's also sort of helped me to understand that people are awesome, and people are really genuinely trying to look out for you and help you in your journey, and that's been an amazing thing.
Nice. Talking about the environment, have there been places you've been that you've seen deteriorate or seen changes in over time since you started taking photographs?
Yeah, I think that's there's definitely some places like that. There's like Iceland was really noticeable from, I think I went there in 2014 and then or 2013, and then I went back in 2018, and it was quite remarkable how much that place had changed even just in a few years, in terms of, car parks where they weren't, and
Yeah,
areas and things that, that it just felt less wild, and it felt a little bit more organized and structured, I suppose.
yeah,
And Tasmania has that happening as well. There's certainly other places that have changed quite a lot. Even I went to Kangaroo Island, as I mentioned earlier, and I hadn't been there for quite a long time, and that had changed a lot, also through fire, but also just through the development that's been going on down there too, which is a natural thing. But yeah, certainly some places are more degraded than they should be, because they've just become too popular or over popular, and there hasn't been the right amount of restriction or control over access to those particular areas as well. There's also places that people say are targets for that, and they're not, or they're overstated as well. So does go both ways. But in general, there's definitely that trend. But I'm also of the opinion that everyone should be able to see these places if they would like to see them, if they can treat it with respect, and also get there in the right way, and researching things, understanding what's involved, and doing, being respectful about it. Unfortunately, it's not really, I think, a lot of the time photographers at all that cause the damage. It's actually the people that the photographers inspired by posting their images. So I think other photographers get a lot of flack for causing the damage, but it's really the people that get inspired by that, and so it's a really challenging space to kind of wrap your head around. That I'm trying to create work that is beautiful and people can connect with, and often when people see something that's beautiful, they want to see it for themselves as well. And so you're inadvertently, I guess, if you're an influencer, you're influencing people to see these places. Definitely. And so we have to be very careful with messaging, and communicating where sensitive locations are. And I actually worked on a decision matrix on what parameters are there to and how much to reveal about where a place actually is. But in general, if it's got a car park and you can shoot from the car park, it's generally okay. If you have to go in on a big hike and no one knows where it is already, then it's probably a pretty good idea just to shut up and just let people enjoy the picture. So
if there's no trail, don't talk about where it is.
Definitely, and you don't have to, there's no need to even mention it. You can still talk about what's in the image, but there's kind of no need. I think a lot of people naturally feel like there's they have a right to know if it's up online, but it's definitely not the case. I wrote something once, that there's no shame in not revealing a location's name. It's not you don't have to do anything if you don't want to. So, and you can always just tag it something as Tasmania if you had to, or the national park, or whatever generic, as well. Yeah. So you don't have to be so specific with things. And so that's definitely a lesson I've learned over time. I definitely was much more naive when I was posting earlier on, when I was still pretty green and fresh to it all, and definitely changed my approach since. But yeah, there's definitely everyone is an influencer if you're putting out shots online. Doesn't matter how big your audience is. If someone's seen it, you've influenced them in some way. And so everyone has a responsibility to a degree to message responsibly in the images that they're putting out there.
Absolutely.
And both from a safety perspective and access, but also from looking after the place when they're actually if they choose to visit. So I think it's getting a lot better that way. But and people are getting more adventurous these days too. There's a lot more information out there about how to do these sort of trips and where to go and those kind of things. So it's a that sort of question and love to death kind of aspect and talking about that kind of thing is a discussion for the ages. Really, it's always going to be a challenge for any landscape photographer that's I can't say people shouldn't go there. I went there, so what right do I have to say that?
That's exactly it.
It's more about being responsible about it, because as I was saying, I put a lot of time into planning and working all this stuff out, and so it's not like I'm just doing it flippantly or just so it's it's definitely something to consider.
Definitely. In terms of I'd like to turn to the how now, in terms of how you learnt your photography and in particular your processing. Was that something that you lent on mentors, or did you just sort of pick it up as you went along and through trial and error and YouTube, etc.? Or
Yeah, well, a lot of what I was learning was almost, when I was learning a lot of stuff, there wasn't a huge amount on YouTube even back in the day. The biggest game changer for me in terms of processing has definitely been luminosity masking and the Tony Kuiper luminosity masking panel, and I very highly recommend the Sean Bagshaw videos that go with that. It's probably been the key thing that I've gone through that's given me the most capability or understanding in terms of editing, and I certainly needed that when I was shooting on those old Canon cameras back in the day when there wasn't really any dynamic range to speak of. I don't seem to need them quite so much anymore with the newer Sony sensors, but it's still very handy to have. And Lightroom's also got some aspects of luminosity masking baked in. And so, I've spent money on tutorials from various photographers that I admire or were recommended to me in terms of what to do. And I think that there's obviously nothing wrong with that. You want to be learning from the best in the world, and totally. If they're able to provide that information to you, then that's great, and that's just professional development. I'm a big advocate for seeking out people that you like their work and asking what they do and seeing if you can tee up a session. I don't actually haven't done that myself, but I often feel like I should. There's no, I think there shouldn't be a stigma around that, and definitely. You're also helping out that particular photographer as well, in terms of making a living. So everyone wins really. That's right. And YouTube's just incredible now too. Like, if you want to know anything about anything, you just look on YouTube. So there's so much information out there, but it's really nice to have a core sort of process that you kind of develop on. And I like to think it like tools in the tool belt. You hear about these little techniques that really work. And you can pull that tool out if you need a certain look or you want to try and achieve a certain thing with the image. But you don't want to have so many tools that you can't choose which one you want to use. So you need to sort of be discerning with that. And you also don't want to be always using a hammer every time in your photo as well, right. or overusing a particular tool when you need other things. So it's a bit of an acquired sort of thing. But editing for me is a very iterative process in Lightroom, top to bottom of all the sliders, move all the sliders until it looks good. I love using radial filters as well, and to create a sense of depth, and also placing light in certain or brightening up certain areas of the image, and then luminosity masking and color adjustments and other aspects in Photoshop. So, but I'm trying to do as much as I can in Lightroom these days, just because it speeds the process up quite a bit. Okay. I certainly enjoy the capture process much more than the editing process, and my very, very extensive backlog of images to be edited, it can attest to that. And I'm one of my, probably, if you talk about failures other than successes, is that I've got a huge amount of work that I haven't shown people, stemming back many years that I need to actually have some time to get to edit and put it out there. So that's sort of
I was going
an
to
area of
ask about
improvement.
that. Are you home from the shoot and straight onto the computer and into edit mode, or are you just leaving it and you backing it up, obviously, but leaving it for to gestate for a bit before you get
Yeah,
into it?
to have a bit of a marination period. I think so I'm definitely back up as soon as I get back. So my golden rule is that, when I'm out shooting, I don't wipe any cards. I take a
Yep.
lot of cards with me, and then I'll back up on the road if I have access to a laptop as well.
Sure.
And then yes, everything straight on the computer, and then if I can, I'll also then create a backup of the files on my server as well after that. So that's a given, because you don't want to go out to the next shoot and then have some card images on your cards, and then you don't know if you've backed them up or not.
Yeah.
So and
I always
then
blank
yeah,
the card once I've backed it up. It's
yeah, well, that's a very good approach for sure. And but it's very mood based for me with editing, and I need to be in the right mood, or I need to have often, unfortunately, I need to have an outcome in mind to edit something. It's not necessarily something I do from like a recreational kind of approach. And like earlier this year, I did a very ambitious project of 100 in 100, where I was posting 100 photos in 100 days. And I did that entirely to have an outcome for editing, and forced me to actually edit some pictures, because otherwise I find it very difficult to do that. So I have to sometimes play some tricks with myself to make that happen, and very much admire people, say like Will Patino, who can just edit up a whole gallery of images and just and put them out there from a 3 months of work or what have you. It's I would ideally love to be able to do something like that, but my process just doesn't work that way. So, and I think it's important to not try and shoehorn yourself into a process that it isn't.
No, definitely. You've got to do what works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but yeah, definitely more of a marinator, and trying to pick off bits and pieces. There's still images in my mind that I know I've taken.
Yep.
That I would, just think about editing and getting it out there. And if I was hit by a bus, that's probably the first thing I would think of as like, why didn't I do that? So but that's all you can't do everything, and but yeah, I do have an intense desire to get more of that work out, and hopefully can it in 2026 or whenever that will be.
In terms of printing, do you do your own printing, or are you using a service, or
Yeah, well, I work with a print lab called Full Gamut, but down here in Hobart, they're absolutely brilliant. Shout out to them. But they really have looked after me, and I use them. They actually are the only authorized printer to print Peter Dombrovskis. Well, I don't know if it's actually true if they're the only one, but they print Peter Dombrovskis's work, and with permission from Liz Dombrovskis, and she gets royalties through that and all of that. But for me, if it's good enough to print his work, then it's definitely good enough for mine then.
Absolutely.
But I also do print my own as well, and I'm really happy with the quality that I get. I actually feel like it matches really well the quality that Full Gamut do. And I use Canson papers, and use the same papers and profiles that they do, so that really helps as well. But yeah, I really enjoy printing. I don't do it a huge amount, but when I do see that print come off, it's definitely a really nice feeling to see it in physical form.
Yeah, I think there's something really satisfying about getting that, whether it comes back from the service or getting that paper out of the printer and just seeing the image there, and it's got that tactile feel to it.
Oh, it sure does. Be nice to have some more space to actually put those up and be able to admire them more. But I'm really want to get more prints listed up on my website, so I can sell a few more of those and get them onto people's walls would be really nice. And I'm hoping to have an exhibition next year and a few other things to sort of kick off a bit more printing in that as well. So, but yeah, that's a side of things that it's a bit of a mysterious area for some people when they're starting out. It certainly was for me. I really had no idea what to do.
Like art.
Yeah, I feel a lot more confident with it now. And if you have the right process with your color management, and a really good printer, either a lab to work with or buy your own printer. And I've got an ISO calibrated monitor as well, which really helps.
Yeah.
Then that's all going to tie together really nicely. And now if I see the image on the screen, that's exactly what I see on the paper. It's quite amazing, really, to see it come through so clear and sharp and the same colours. It is quite a joy.
Excellent. Have you ever hit a creative wall, and if so, how did you handle it?
Oh, I definitely have. And I remember I actually messaged, I think I'd just been on a workshop with Peter Eastway, and it might have been back in the day, there was the focus group, and we did a trip, and Peter was on it. And I sent him a message afterwards, actually, and said, Peter, I'm going through this bit of a funk, and I'm sure you must have had something similar over a period of time. And he said, yeah, well, why don't you just try doing something a bit different, like black and white, and then I was like, yeah, no, that's a great idea. So I actually did a lot more black and whites and got into the infrared and things like that, and that really gave me a big kick. And so I think for me, it's about just if you're finding it challenging, then try maybe doing something a little bit different. I have to admit that hasn't happened for a long time. The only issue I really have now is more about burnout and having time for things. I've got an endless list of things that I could shoot, and I fully expect that I will shoot those things one day. So from that perspective, I don't think it's creativity that's a limitation, but certainly if people out there are struggling with it is real. And a lot of the time it's because maybe you need to find a project, or you need to find an outcome for what you're trying to create. And like maybe you want to do a book, or maybe you want to a gallery on a website, or a virtual exhibition online, or have a product or something that you want to create with the work, a body of work, and maybe work with that, or get a camera converted to infrared, or start shooting some astrophotography. There's all sorts of other things you can focus on that can change. It might be an interest thing. You might have lost interest in the things that you were doing, and you need to have a fresh hit of dopamine somewhere else.
Definitely. Great advice. In terms of projects, what's next for Luke?
Well, I've got a few workshops coming up. I've got one coming up with my friend Ben Mays in the Tarkine, and one with Paul in the Tarkine as well. It's getting slammed at the moment, unfortunately, with hundreds of millimeters of rain. So hopefully it's still in decent enough nick after that. And then also heading to King Island, which should be really fun.
Nice.
On a workshop with Ian Rolfe, who's run about 25 workshops over there. So he obviously knows it very well. So and I've never been there, so I'm really excited about that. And I'm running that with Paul as well. And then I'm currently doing a lot of photography for Great Walks of Australia, which is a umbrella marketing agency for commercial bushwalking experiences. And so I've got a couple more, or 3 more of those coming up as well, which is for me, it's really amazing because I love bushwalking and I love photography. And so it's pretty incredible to be able to actually get paid to go and photograph people bushwalking and having dinner and all of the various activities and things that they do through that time. So that's been really rewarding work. And then at the end of the year, I'm heading off to Antarctica, which is also very exciting. So very jam-packed back end of the year. But it's very, all good things.
How long are you heading down there for?
I'm in Antarctica for 38 days. And so I'm working with Sony and with Intrepid down there, which those guys have put a partnership together. And I'm very fortunately doing 3 voyages down there. So it should be pretty intense again, but obviously not going to say no to an opportunity to go to Antarctica. And so it's over Christmas and New Year's. Christmas will have come at once there. But very fortunate and very grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, amazing. I'm very jealous of that.
Yeah, well, certainly. I never thought I'd actually get down there, so it's
Yeah,
quite remarkable, I suppose. Doing this landscape photography gig is definitely, I wouldn't say a financial one, but from a lifestyle one, and being able to see the world and being able to have a bit of personal freedom, it is quite amazing. And so I guess that's the spin-off benefit, I suppose, of making that sacrifice in terms of having a consistent income and knowing where all of your rent money is coming from and all of those kind of aspects. So, yeah.
absolutely. What do you see as the biggest challenge facing landscape photographers in particular right now?
Ooh, um, I mean, I personally feel like it's probably a controversial opinion, but I feel like things getting too murky with digital art versus actual natural shot images, or however you would like to put it, and it losing shots that represent the world as it is, or try to represent reality, whatever that word means. I think
Yep.
natural is probably a nice word to use there. I personally feel like there's a risk that people will look at landscape photography and just start feeling like nothing's real anymore, and I think
Yeah,
that's a real shame. I don't know. There's no real answer to it, and I certainly don't judge people that do create amazing images, but yeah, I do get a bit worried that the general public might start to get disillusioned, although maybe they don't care. Maybe they're just happy to see something beautiful, and it doesn't really matter if it's actually what was there, or someone's created it. Ignorance is bliss sometimes, I suppose.
maybe.
So I probably, like, I don't think about that as much as I used to. It used to really bother me. Now it's just I have to just think about what I do, and just I know what my work represents, and hopefully people that see that can also appreciate that. But yeah, it's hard for me to think of anything else in that sort of space other than that kind of an argument, and it's the argument for the ages, really, anyway.
Definitely.
And some would say that the argument shouldn't be made anymore. It's over. It's all talked about. That's the end of it. But realistically,
Well,
it's a
composites have been around since the beginning of photography almost.
yeah, that's right.
The Frank Hurley stuff and the Ansel Adams himself, he was
Yeah.
known for doing composites. And so I'm not sure why there's ever been a real argument. I know that back in the day when Frank Hurley was doing some of his World War One shots, for example, there was quite a lot of criticism of his work because it wasn't necessarily reflecting what really happened, but then, it definitely represented a vision of what was happening because each of the elements was, maybe photographed separately. Not only that, I think the technical challenge of doing that with the old silver glass plates as well at the time was probably a fascinating experience in terms of working out how to put all them together.
Yeah, I sort of feel a part of it might even be to do with, is what we're doing art, or is it like
Well, this is it.
documenting a
Yeah.
place as well? And certainly in the Tasmanian context, there's certain photographers that I know very, very well that would find it completely abhorrent if someone was to go into a wilderness location in Tasmania and then create a series of composite images, or manipulating the landscape in some way.
Yeah.
And one could say, well, that's kind of, people can do what they want, and they absolutely can. But the point being that there's not many of these wilderness places left, and so
Yeah.
the idea that we need to augment something that is what it is,
Naturally beautiful.
naturally beautiful, and is in there's not many of these sort of places left, and we still have to fiddle with those ones too, I think, is
Yeah.
where that
No,
sentiment's coming
I
from.
go along with that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's quite an interesting perspective to have as well on that particular argument. But
Definitely.
you can only well, I think argument's probably the wrong word. It's just a perspective, I suppose, and there's no real. There shouldn't be an argument. I think it's just more about. I think people get worried that others, maybe the general public, are getting misled sometimes, or what have you. And I guess there's folks like me that put a significant amount of work planning to get the Milky Way in the right place. And if the Milky Way is not in the right place, or the sun didn't do this or that, then I'll have to come back next year. But then you could have someone else that turns up there and goes, oh, well, I shot the Milky Way last night and that was great, so I'll just pop that there. So, the argument about how much does it matter, how much effort was put in to take the image, and there might be a bit of ego and emotion that comes along with that, perhaps.
Definitely.
Is that but is there also like an aspect where you just have to come to peace with those sort of scenarios. So that's where it becomes a personal thing, I think. And what are you trying to get out with it? What do you enjoy about it? And in that sort of example, I really enjoy when all the elements come together that you've been planning to happen, and you just it's one of the best feelings in the world. And so you really want to. That's why I do it. So I don't get that feeling when I'm in Photoshop dropping in a sky. So
no, that's right.
So I guess that's where my view is on that, I suppose. But it's, again, no criticism to people that do that. But it's just,
it'd be a boring world if everybody agreed with one another, wouldn't it?
Well, that's very true. It's very true. So it is nice that there's people out there that can really just let loose and really create these most amazing scenes. So it's all good.
What do you like to do when you're not out shooting?
Well, I mean, what do I do? I mean, I work on my business a lot, so I'm always. There's no shortage of work. Let's put it that way. But I do going out on walks. I like going out, catching up with people, and that kind of aspect, being a bit more social. I suppose a lot of my work is travel. So generally, when I have time off, it's actually at home on the couch, or try not to do too much. That's sort of my idea of a holiday, I guess. So I can't really even go on a holiday, because if I'm somewhere and there's a beautiful sunset, it's just incredibly hard to not take advantage and take some shots. So I want to go on a holiday somewhere beautiful, so it's going to happen. So I'm a bit of a nightmare to go on holidays like traveling with, because you can't really. It's very hard to disconnect with that. So for me, it's a lot to do with just resting and relaxing, and I don't know, what else do I do. That's probably about it. I love to get into gardening more and those kind of aspects too. But it's just finding the time. I guess one could say that when you've got a whole bunch to do, you fill in all of the gaps with other things that you needed to do. So there's not much of that, and that's where the burnout can come in. So it's also a matter of trying to balance that as well. So when someone has the perfect formula, let me know. I'm very keen to hear
it. I'd definitely like to hear it too. Are there any photographers out there you think I should be talking to on the podcast?
I have to admit, I don't know your back catalogue extensively, but certainly my friend Paul and Nick, they'd be brilliant to talk to. Sure. I think you've spoken to Ben before, and Will as well. Those guys are great. Have you spoken to someone like Ben Good in Sydney, in South Australia, or?
I've hit him up, but I haven't got him booked yet. So
and Dylan Toe as well.
Sorry, go on.
Dylan Toe is fantastic as well. Have a look photography. There's I could go on for many years with that. But I pretty much recommend anyone that we've ever had on as a guest, and we're always we're in a similar space, I suppose, in terms of...
Don't worry, I'm always combing your list as well as national.
Well, it's always nice to see who's also open to talking, and it's not everyone that is as interested as others in doing it. So that's always nice, and I think I know for myself, I absolutely love talking about my journey in photography, and I think most photographers love talking about themselves. So it's always a pleasure to be able to do that, and I loved the idea that something that I might say might inspire someone else, and so I really hope that that's also something that comes through, and the passion that I have can maybe rub off on other people as well, like it has from other people that I've met. So it's all it's really just a nice thing to talk landscape photography.
Absolutely. I've got one more question, and for most of my listeners, it's probably the most important, and it's a really big social issue. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I didn't even have to flinch then. I love tropical burgers as well, like pineapple and burgers.
Yeah, the pineapple on the burgers. It's not a burger, it's got pineapple on it.
Yeah, there must be some chemical thing that goes on that turns people off so much, or a textural thing or something like that. But
Could be, yeah. I know pineapple juice has, if you marinate steak in pineapple juice, it softens the fibres significantly. So maybe.
Yeah. Could be, there's some of the enzymes that are in there or something like that.
Don't react well with some people.
And also, I think the pineapple can make pizzas go a bit sloppy too sometimes if you haven't drained it or anything like that. Bring it on. Like that's not a deterrent by any means. But having said that, I think you could probably put anything on a pizza and I'd still eat it. So I'm a pretty big fan. So there's no worries there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today to talk to me, Luke. It's been wonderful getting to know you a little bit better and know a little bit more about how you do what you do. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've got my website, tscharke.com, which is probably less updated than it should be, but there's also my social media, which probably is not updated as much as should be either, but at Tscharke, and then also Twitter, Luke Tscharke, and then confusingly on Facebook, I'm Luke Tscharke Photo. But and that's probably the best places to find my work across those sort of areas. Most active probably on talking landscape photography at the moment on our YouTube channel. So you can look that one up as well. So
I'll make sure all of those are in the show notes.
Oh, brilliant. That'll be great.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks very much, Luke. Great talking to you.
Oh, you're very welcome, Grant. Thanks for having me on. It's been awesome.
Pleasure. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.